Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Throughout my life, I would say that I've probably played over 1,000 games, a lot of which being free Flash games. When I was younger, I used to love browsing through the individual genre pages on websites to find new games that I could play. Through this, I ended up playing many different games, helping me find some of my all-time favourites. One of these is Strategy Defense. Released in 2007 by Beluga Games, Strategy Defense is a fantasy turn-based strategy game, where the player acts as a one-man army to take on the forces of a powerful enemy kingdom in order to save their king's imprisoned family and their kingdom's top general. Throughout this video, I'll be discussing the game in great detail, and ultimately reviewing the game based on these 5 criteria: the core gameplay mechanics, the story, the balancing, the sound and art design, and the replayability. However, since I have played the game before, even if it was many years ago, I'll be using my most recent playthrough of the game in order to make sure that I review these aspects as fairly as possible, whilst also considering the modern audience. Also, if you're interested in watching my gameplay, my lightly edited playthrough of the game has been uploaded to my second channel, which is linked down below in the description. And now, with all that established, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. When loading up the game, we get this short cutscene showing the two kingdoms battling, which then leads to the main menu. From here we can start a new game, load one of a possible 9 saves, view the in-game explanation of the game, go into the options menu to select the current music and change the volume, view the high scores, and view other games on crazymonkeygames.com. Pretty standard Flash game stuff. However, the in-game explainer hints at the surprising depth of the game's mechanics, which I'm going to go into detail now. If you're not bothered and want to head to the actual gameplay, please skip to the time on screen. After looking at the playing screen, we get a brief explanation of all of the 17 metrics which we can see during our gameplay. The health, ammo and magic are exactly as said, but the next 9 metrics are a fair bit more complicated. However, we can explain 3 of these at once by looking at the way the game calculates damage. So, time for a quick maths lesson. The damage taken is the ceiling of the power of the attacker minus the sum of the target's armor and strength divided by 2. So, in this example, our power is 15, and Bobby's armor and strength are 5 and 1 respectively. So we take 15 and minus 5 plus 1 divided by 2, which is 3. Therefore we should deal 12 damage. As you can see, that's exactly what happens. Now Bobby gets a revenge shot on us, so we need to factor in the damage that he will do. Bobby's power is 6, and our armor and strength are 4 and 5 respectively. So 6 minus 4.5 is 1.5. However, since the damage taken is the ceiling of this value, this is always rounded up to the next whole number. So we should take 2 damage, which is exactly what happens. Moving on, the attack value is simply our attack range. So, an attack value of 3 means that we can attack anything within 3 tiles of us. Similarly, our speed affects the number of tiles that we can move. However, the explainer doesn't mention that the player and enemies can only move like rooks in chess, straight lines only. Also, another thing that isn't explained is that agility does absolutely nothing. Seriously, I've checked the code. It does nothing. Next, we have luck, which is explained very vaguely. Essentially, and I'm not joking, This value increases by a random number between 0 and 4 every time the player finishes a mission. Other than that, it also does nothing. It's literally a visual representation of how lucky you are as a person, which I am not. Then we have effectivity. As shown, the lower the turn number, the higher the effectivity. But what does that actually mean? As later explained in the in-game help, the player gains more money at the end of a battle if they have a lower turn count, meaning that the effectivity is a measure of how effectively we dealt with the enemies. So, the more effective we were, the higher the payment. This is calculated by the ceiling of 10 multiplied by the mission number divided by the number of turns minus 1. However, this is only a visual representation, as the calculation for earning money is a bit different. I will explain exactly how that works later in the video, as that will be very important. Our kill instinct within a mission is the ceiling of the number of enemies killed, multiplied by our remaining health, divided by our total health. This, like effectivity, doesn't impact our character in-game. From here, everything else is as it sounds, but I'll take the time now to explain how leveling up works. Just like any other game, when our XP is greater than or equal to the level boundary, we level up. Looking at this example, we need 100 XP for the next level. After defeating Bobby, we reach 102 XP, and the XP required for the next level is 204, 2 times our current value. This is always the case when leveling up, as you can see here. So it makes the most sense to optimize barely reaching the level boundary so that less XP is required for each level afterwards. When leveling up, some of our stats increase, allowing us to deal with the enemies easier. To help explain this, I've put the code for the leveling up function on screen. To quickly summarise, our max HP is increased by 25% of our max HP before levelling up. Our power is increased by 10% in the same way. Our armour and strength are both increased by 20%, and finally our agility is also increased by 25%. All of these are ceiling functions, like the damage, so they're always rounded up to the next whole number. To demonstrate this, let's look at our HP. Our current HP before levelling up is 50, so 50 plus 12.5 is 62.5. Rounding this up to the next number, we get 63. Other than the changing level boundaries, I really like how balanced levelling up feels to the player. Although there's no way for the player to know exactly how these formulas work without decompiling the game like I did, the player can still benefit from the information in the help screen. Anyway, with all that explained, let's start a new game and learn the story of the legendary warrior, Bingus. Once upon a time, there were 2 kingdoms, Dovan and Dogfire. Dogfire Kingdom expanded their territory and destroyed all of the villagers in the Dovan Kingdom. Most of the Dovan Kingdom army was killed, and the king of Dovan, named Fela, ran into the dark forest, powerless and without soldiers or guards to protect him. His wife, children, and the Dovan general were imprisoned at the Ice Green Island. But Fela was not hopeless. There was one warrior named Bingus from the Dovan Kingdom, who had intelligence, strength, and many talents. King Fela ordered Bingus to find and rescue his family, and to destroy all the enemies of the land of Dovan. Bingus, you must enter the enemy village and clear the area of enemies. After clearing the village, you should go to the shop to buy any items, magic, and weapons that you need. Yes, my lord. Here, use my bow to kill the enemy easier. I will send the courier to give you new information. Thank you, my lord. I will go. With that, we enter our first mission, escape. At the beginning of every mission, we're given a mission objective and a mission failure condition, which is always if we lose all of our health and die. So that's a little pointless. But regardless, this mission is one of the few where we actually have multiple ways to beat it. We could run straight to the arrow to finish the mission, escaping the archers. Or we could take them on and gain XP from defeating them. At the beginning of every mission, we have the first turn, with 3 options that we can currently choose from: move, attack, and wait. I've already explained how moving works when talking about the agility stat, and I've also explained how the attack stat is our attack range. However, there are a few more things to cover about attacks. Attacking an enemy uses one of our 20 ammo, unless we're using a melee weapon. If we attack an enemy in our turn, they can retaliate with a revenge attack if we're within range. So sometimes it's better to just wait, as that immediately ends our turn. Don't worry about not dealing any damage, since we can also revenge attack the enemy when they attack us during their turn, which also uses one of our 20 ammo, depending on the weapon. Moving on to the second mission, War Begun, we're tasked with defeating all of the enemies, with our first new enemy type present, the Archmaster. This guy has better stats compared to the other archers, so he deals more damage to us and takes less damage from us compared to the other archers. However, even with revenge attacks, I think this mission is literally impossible to lose. So let's move on to the third mission, Defeat the Master, where we're specifically tasked with defeating the Archmaster. This mission teaches us more about impassable terrain, since we can't cross the river without using the bridges. But in terms of the objective, this mission is also impossible to lose, since we've gained a few levels. Since we're now done with those basic tutorials, we can now access the shop on the world map. Here we can buy 2 new weapons that we can use, the Speedy Arrow and the Fire Arrow. At a cost of $35, the Speedy Arrow increases our attack range to 6 tiles, which doubles our current range. In the item shop description, it says that it increases our damage by 3, but does it really? Let's have a look. When attacking James here with this Speedy Arrow, following our formula from earlier, we should deal 15 damage. If the Speedy Arrow does indeed increase our damage by 3, we should see James take 18 damage. That's not right. It turns out the in-game description is actually wrong. The Speedy Arrow increases our damage by 2, which is why we dealt 17 damage. Wait, so is the Fire Arrow incorrect as well? Well, thankfully, this description is correct, and the Fire Arrow increases our range to 4 tiles, meaning that for only $50 this is quite useful. Plus, as an added bonus, you can use fire arrows to deal with these trees in order to move onto those tiles. We can also buy a health item for $35, which restores 25 HP, an ammo item for $30, which restores 10 ammo, and a magic arrow for $55, which is our first magic weapon. This doesn't give us any damage boost, but this can be used to target any enemy across the entire map for only 2 magic points and 1 ammo point. This is incredibly useful in the early game to prevent taking damage from revenge attacks, but since it doesn't increase our damage dealt like other weapons, this does get left behind later in the game. Coming back to the missions, we're now entering the 4th mission, Night Terror. Our objective here is to kill our second new enemy type, the Knight. Although Knights only have an attack range of 1, they can deal quite a bit of damage, and they can move up to 6 tiles with a speed of 6. So with 2 Archmasters and 5 Archers to deal with as well as the Knight, we need to be mindful of the damage that we take. Therefore we should position ourselves so that the enemies body block each other, so the Knight can't attack us, which helps make this mission quite easy. Also, since we can now purchase items from the shop, we now gain items and magic as 2 more options to select as our main action, with speedy arrows and fire arrows as options to attack with too. Anyway, if 1 Knight wasn't enough, we now have to deal with 4 as we enter our 5th mission, Get Out from Night. Here the objective says that we can kill all enemies or reach the arrow sign. However, you have to reach the arrow sign to beat the level, whether you also kill the enemies or not. Now we get introduced to another feature in our 6th mission, 2-step. Here we have to reach this gold bar, and then reach the arrow sign. Throughout certain missions, there will be these gold bars to collect. These give an extra $500, so they're a nice bonus for buying stuff at the shop. Here we have 2 archers which use speedy arrows in these squares here, an archmaster that shoots with fire arrows, and 2 knights. So we do have to be careful. However, since we're not required to deal with all the enemies, I just finished the mission early. And so, we've completed the first chapter. Excuse me, boss, we have some trouble. Our village has been taken by a mysteriously strong man with a powerful arched weapon. Most of our village soldiers have died.
What? Send the strongest soldiers to stop him, including riflemen, bomberman, and tank.
Okay, boss.
Message from King. Dogfire soldiers have moved to the rock village with heavy equipment to catch your Dyalla, boss. Use your war tactics and take the horse from the shop to change into knight, and after the next battle, you should change to rifleman to make it easier to defeat the enemy. Knight will be useful to avoid bomberman because he can run fast. Rifleman will be useful for long range attacks.
Okay, thank you, and tell my lord the orders will be done.
Okay, boss, I'll be back.
As the courier said, we're now able to purchase an item from the shop which allows us to change into a knight for only $200. This gives us our last action type that we can use in our turn, change. Unlike the other actions, we can use this multiple times in a single turn. Therefore, we can use the movement of the knight and the attacking range of an archer in the same turn. Although we only have an attack range of 1 tile as a knight, we don't use any ammo attacking with our sword. Our speed is increased to 8, and our power is invisibly increased by 8 as well. So we deal an extra 8 damage. This means that the 6 extra damage stated in the help screen is wrong, but hey, I'll take it. Anyway, time for the 7th mission, Kill All Riflemen, which is, unsurprisingly, our introduction to Riflemen. Now, this is where we have to actually start strategizing, as these guys do hit hard and have an attack range of 6 tiles. As you can see, since I ended my turn as a knight, I'm unable to revenge attack the Rifleman, meaning that I eventually just run out of health and die. However, I did beat this mission on my 2nd try by using a lot of magic arrows, then switching back to an archer to finish off the final rifleman. At this point in time, we've gained quite a few levels, so I think it's time to explain how we actually gain XP. When we attack an enemy, we gain XP equal to the damage that we dealt multiplied by the difference between the enemy's level and our level. If this difference gives a negative number, or 0, it's adjusted to 1. When we defeat an enemy, the XP gained is also multiplied by 5. As an example, we're going to attack this rifleman, Wood, who's 2 levels higher than us. As we deal 29 damage to him, we gain 58 XP. When we then deal 6 damage to kill him, we gain 60 XP. Hypothetically, if we dealt 30 damage to kill him instead, we would have gained 300 XP. Therefore, we should try to kill enemies by dealing damage equal to their exact remaining health in order to gain the most XP, but that's very hard to do. Now we head into the 8th mission, Hold Out. Here we're tasked with surviving to turn 10, or killing all of the enemies. This is our introduction to Bombermen, which have incredibly high power. So high in fact that they can completely one-shot us. So we use the advice given to us by the courier to change into a knight to avoid them, using magic arrows to deal damage. However, I misjudged my damage right at the end. Whoops. My second and third attempts went even worse. However, in my 4th attempt, I focused on the Bombermen more effectively, and I was able to beat the mission. As a side note, I really like the positioning of this gold bar, since it serves as a guide to the player to use the knight. That's pretty good level design. Anyway, before we enter the 9th mission, we have a few new items in the shop. Now, we're able to buy 2 more magic weapons, rock and water, for $250 and $550 respectively. As explained, using rock magic calls the power of rock from the sky. This allows us to target every enemy within a 3x3 grid, dealing 40 damage to each enemy before factoring in their armor and strength. Similarly, water magic causes us to inflict splash damage on all enemies, dealing 30 damage before factoring in the enemy's armor and strength. Unlike our other weapons, these don't scale their damage with our level, which means that we won't use them for long. You may have seen that these use 10 and 20 magic respectively. But if you've seen our character's stats, you may be wondering, how are we going to cast water if we only have 10 magic? Well, from every mission onwards, we now have 50 magic to work with, which is still not a lot. But to compensate, we can now purchase Magic Plus from the shop for $85, allowing us to restore 20 magic. Also, since our max health is increased by quite a bit, we can now purchase Health Plus, which heals 100 HP for $100, compared to Health's 25 HP for $35. Finally, we can also purchase Ammo Plus, which restores 20 ammo for $75 compared to Ammo's 10 ammo restored for $30. However, unlike our magic, our max ammo remains at 20. Anyway, now's a good time to use our new magic in the 9th mission, the Magic Power. Here, we're tasked with killing all the enemies or moving to the arrow sign. Using the rock magic to target these 2 bombermen and 2 riflemen, we can put ourselves in a good position to finish off the bombermen next turn. However, when I did this, I didn't factor in the enemy's movement. That was dumb. So I opted to use water magic in my next attempt, which also didn't go too well. Okay, instead of using 1 water and 1 rock, I used 2 waters and finished off the bombermen in 2 extra turns. That really shouldn't have been so bad. The 10th mission, the Motor, is unsurprisingly the introduction to our next new enemy type, the Motor. These guys are a military version of the Knight with a speed of 10. Surprisingly, I struggled a lot less with this mission compared to the last one. So let's have a look at the 11th mission instead, Jeep Target. Once again, we're introduced to a new enemy, the Jeep. These guys have a lot of armor and strength, so our attacks deal much less damage to them. However, unlike every enemy so far, these guys have an attack of 0, so they can't actually damage us, despite their seemingly high power. This meant that I didn't really have to use as many resources as I did, and I also could have easily grabbed this gold bar. But oh well. Once again, we have a new item in the shop, the Rifleman change item. For $550, using this gives us a 6 tile attack range, and an invisible 10 power boost compared to the Archer. With this, we can take on the 12th mission, Truck Invasion. Here we're tasked with destroying all of the trucks, another new enemy, or moving to the arrow sign. Not only do these trucks deal quite a bit of damage, we've also got a couple more bombermen and mortars to worry about. Thankfully we can use these rocks to hide from the bombermen, allowing us to easily deal with this mission. However, things are stepping up now as we enter the 13th mission, Snowgate. Now we also have tanks to worry about. I want to remind you guys that we are one singular man that's fighting an incredibly developed military. God damn! These guys have very high stats, meaning that our magics now do very little damage, and they deal a lot of damage to us. This means that we need to deal with the trucks before the tanks reach us. That way we can continuously heal and use revenge attacks to deal damage. So we need to move very carefully. After a long 15 turns, picking up this gold bar along the way, I was able to beat this mission on my second try. And with that, we enter Chapter 3, Tower Defense. I'm sorry boss, but we've lost at the Rock Village battle. The mysterious man has many magical powers with large amounts of damage. Our strongest soldiers were either butchered or retreated to Iceberg Village.
Fool! What is this mysterious man's name? You must find out.
Yes, boss.
Also, strengthen our tower's defense with weapons like missiles, bombs, and lasers to kill him. Go now!
As you wish, boss.
We hear you won the last battle at the Rock Village. Congratulations! King Vela is said to be careful of the Dogfire Tower defense. Our spy has said that the tower has been fortified with terrible weapons. Avoid the tower and attack one by one. Use tank to help destroy the tower. Okay, I will do my best.
As Stardock said, we now have to deal with towers as we progress to our 14th mission, the tower. These are very powerful, with the arrow tower possessing an incredibly high range of 10 tiles, and the rock tower with a range of 8 tiles. These surpass our attack range of 6 tiles. This means that they can very easily get a hit in without us being able to revenge attack them back. However, their range doesn't completely extend to the bottom of the map, so we can stay here to heal when needed. However, when the enemies grouped up here, it would have been a good time to use rock magic, even with their low damage at this point. Apart from the fact that we can't select a tile if there's an enemy overlapping with it, preventing us from attacking all the enemies at once. That's annoying. With enough enemies defeated, I got myself in a position where I could attack both towers and beat the mission, leading to our 15th mission, Fire and Water. Yeah, we've got more tower varieties. These Fire and Water towers both have an attack range of 9 tiles, so we have to try and position ourselves correctly. If we go into the centre, we're in range of every tower at once, causing us to take massive damage. However, this mission wasn't too bad, and I got an additional bonus from this gold bar. This level design then carries over to the 16th mission, Bridge to Tower. Now we have cannon and gun towers to deal with as well, which have an attack range of 9 tiles and 10 tiles respectively. This mission wasn't too difficult either, with the only issue being that this bridge isn't aligned with this exit through the snow, causing us to spend an extra turn in the gun tower's range. Moving on to our 17th mission, Bomb Terror, we have a problem. These bomb towers have 400 power, so they can very easily one-shot us if we're within their 3 tile range. Thankfully, we have another gold bar to guide us. If we change into a knight, we can get out of range here and then change into a rifleman to deal damage. However, we also have these grenade towers to deal with, which have an 8 tile range, plus a tank, so we're not done just yet. After carefully using items and moving across the map, I managed to beat this mission with just 10 HP remaining. As a reward, we get a new item in the shop, the tank change item. As a tank, our power, armor and strength are all increased by 25 compared to our base stats. So we deal an extra 25 damage to enemies and take 25 less. Thank God for that. Now we're more able to take on the 18th mission, Tank Turn. This mission comes with 2 new towers, Missile and Electric, with 13 and 6 tile ranges respectively. 13 tiles. However, the silver lining here is that they're in the middle of the map, so it's easier for us to target them as well. This mission took me a couple of tries to figure out, but we can kill one of the bombermen right at the start and then move over to the left side. As we deal with the towers, the second bomberman comes into our range, making him an easy kill. With that mission down, we now have our final 3 new items to buy in the shop: Health ++, Missiles, and Bombs. For $450 we can restore 250 health, which is great as the health pluses were becoming less and less useful. Missiles have a ridiculously high range of 12 tiles, and they give us an extra 20 power when attacking, so they can deal a lot of damage for only $250. For the same price of the rock magic, that's a pretty damn good deal. For $750 we can purchase Bombs, which have a power of 450 and an attack range of 2 tiles, at the cost of losing 100 HP when using them. Honestly, I think that's pretty balanced, since enemies later in the game can deal more than 100 damage to us pretty easily, so being able to deal with those guys quickly is a godsend. Back to the missions, the 19th mission, Laser and Sonic, gives us our final 2 new tower types. Laser and Sonic towers. With an attack range of 10 tiles and 11 tiles respectively, as well as 2 tanks to deal with, this mission is very dangerous. However, our armor and strength are so high that the tanks which caused us so much trouble before now deal very little damage. So little in fact that we can actually out-heal the damage from every enemy in this mission, as long as we use a health ++ in our turn. So that mission ended up being surprisingly easy. And with that, we enter Chapter 4, Battle on the Sea.
Why is our army being destroyed by only one man? What did you do to let him clear our land and move closer to Ice Green Island? Who is that man?
The Doven people call him Bingus, the last warrior from the Doven Kingdom.
Bingus. Call the Navy commander to eliminate him.
Okay, boss.
Yeah, finally we can expel the Dogfire army from the Doven land. It's time to attack the Ice Green Island and rescue King Phaler's family and the general of Doven Kingdom. Any word from the king? Yes, boss. My Lord Phaler gives me an address of our spy at Ice Green Island. You should find him as soon as you land at Ice Green Island and then buy the items, weapons, and magic that you will need for battle. Be careful. Our spy tells me that Stardox has many soldiers with terrible forces such as ships, submarines, and helicopters. I hope you can get there to save the king's family and the general of Doven Kingdom. I hope so too. I will come back with the victory.
Now, the 20th mission, Ship Arrived, can be handled very similarly to the last mission. However, these new ship enemies are no joke. They barely outrange our tank with a range of 7 tiles, but they only have a speed of 3. So it's possible for us to attack, turn into a knight, run away, and then turn back into a tank, allowing us to reach safety. However, I didn't like that plan. So I instead kept close to the enemies, using missiles when I knew I could kill them, and swiftly moved on to the 21st mission, the Destroyer. Now we're finally getting into the difficult missions. Although these destroyers look like the ships from the last mission, they actually deal much more damage, meaning that we take significantly more damage than we can heal if every enemy is attacking us. We can get a couple hits in for free by using missiles, but this took me a little bit to figure out, even with this gold bar which is intended to guide you. But if you thought I struggled there, it got even worse in the 22nd mission, Submarine Attack. We already had to deal with 2 high-hitting destroyers in the last mission, and now we've also got 2 submarines as well. These guys deal even more damage than the destroyers, have an 8-tile attack range, and take less damage too. But they can only move 2 tiles. Yay! The only flip side is that we are now a destroyer as well, since we're now in the blue deep sea. This gives us an additional 25 power, armor and strength, just like the tank. However, if we take damage from every enemy at once, we're still just gonna die in one turn. Even if we were only hit by 3 enemies, we still can't out-heal that damage. So we just need to deal with 2 enemies before running out of time. Bring out the bomb. With that, I was able to deal with the second destroyer by staying in this corner. From there, I kept moving in and out of the centre to exploit the submarine's slow speed, eventually giving me the win. Phew! Now we enter the 23rd mission, Helicopter. To add on to my misery in the last mission, we now also have a helicopter to deal with. This guy deals even more damage than the submarines, has the same attack range, and can move 5 tiles. Safe to say, we need to minimise the number of enemies. After levelling up, our stats increased more than they should have, since the boost of 25 from being a destroyer is a visible boost. With that, I was able to out-heal the remaining enemies pretty easily, taking us to the final chapter. Chapter 5, Final Battle.
No! Bingus has arrived at Ice Green Island. Let me show him the real power of the Dogfire Kingdom.
Yes, boss. We will bring all the best of our army to kill him without mercy.
This could be the last battle for him, or me. I bring a message from the Doven King.
Okay, what do you need?
I need weapons, magic, and other items to attack the Dogfire Kingdom.
Okay, let me show you our equipment. Please choose what you need. Be careful. While at war, you cannot go to any shop and your abilities cannot recover. Prepare well now, before you go to the final battle. And one last thing, because of the magical powers of the Ice Green Island, at every battle your rank will default to Dragon Archer. Please buy enough change items to be able to change your rank into a higher one when needed. The Dogfire army is very strong. Be careful, warrior. Okay, thank you. I must go now. Here it is, the final set of missions. Here we have to complete 5 missions back to back. No stat restoration, no keeping our current rank between missions, and no shopping. We can only use the items that we bought before beginning the 24th mission, Final Battle 1, which has a total of 18 enemies that we've got to get through. Thankfully, we've come a long way since we last had to deal with archers and knights. But that doesn't mean we're safe. We are able to one-shot the archers that attack us, but they do deal a good bit of damage. We can obtain this gold bar here. However, as said before, we're unable to purchase any items. So any money from now is useless apart from counting towards our final score. Anyway, let's move on to the 25th mission, Final Battle 2. Even though we are now at a point where we can survive a bomb from the Bombermen, These enemies deal so much damage that we will still die in one turn if we don't position ourselves properly and deal with this first Bomberman. So this took me a good while to figure out. However, I did eventually beat this mission and moved on. Entering the 26th mission, Final Battle 3, we can truly see the effect of the lack of stat restoration between missions. By not having enough ammo to revenge attack the enemies, I couldn't deal any damage. But without healing in this turn, I wouldn't have enough health to survive either. So I lost the war of attrition. In my next attempt, I played through the 25th mission much better. When there was only one motor left, I exploited the motor's lack of range to heal up and restock my ammo before beginning the next mission. Although it was still difficult, I was able to manage the enemies by moving along the back end of the map, preventing all of the enemies from attacking me at once. With that done, I entered the 27th mission, Final Battle 4. Since the water enemies got in the way of each other, I was able to deal with the laser and sonic towers without too much trouble. However, once I ran out of healing items, it was only a matter of time before I lost. I just had to manage my items better. I sold even more items in the shop to purchase more health plus pluses before trying again. Now, with my experience over the previous missions, it wasn't too long until I got back here again. Since the enemies kept pushing each other towards this little corner of the water, I was able to deal with them much easier. Once it was just the destroyers and submarines left, I pulled out the missiles to finish the job, taking me to the final mission, the duel. Now it's finally time to take on Stardox. He's an absolute beast with 2000 health, infinite ammo, 125 power, and 75 armor and strength. Because of this, we deal very little damage to him, and he deals a decent amount of damage to us. But it's nothing that we can't out-heal, right? Well, yes, but I'm out of health plus pluses again. But this time, there's no wiggle room with the items that we still own in the shop, and no way for us to gain any extra money either. And so, despite playing well with what I had, I couldn't defeat Stardox, failing King Phaler in saving his family and the Doven Kingdom's top general. If only I earned more money. And so, with that, it's finally time to explain how earning money works. In the in-game help that we looked at earlier, there were 2 tips provided to the player to give an idea of how to make the most money. The first is a low turn count, and therefore a high effectivity, as said earlier. However, this effectivity value isn't exactly what's used. The second is ending the level with high HP, which I overlooked throughout my playthrough. In the code, the money earned at the end of a mission is calculated by taking the ceiling of 6 multiplied by 10 multiplied by the mission number minus the turn, multiplied by 10 multiplied by the remaining health divided by the total health. So let's take the 10th mission as an example. It took me 5 turns to beat this mission with 98 health remaining. This means that I earned $2,880 at the end of the mission. However, I could have moved before ending my 4th turn, preventing me from taking an extra 24 damage at the cost of an extra turn since I wouldn't revenge attack. So how would that have affected my money earned? Using those new numbers, I would have earned $3,547 instead. So by prioritising beating the missions quickly instead of beating them with health to spare, I earned very little money throughout the entire game. Furthermore, like an absolute moron, I didn't make multiple saves across the game so I could go back if needed. And so with this knowledge, I began a new save and made my way back to Chapter 5 the hard way.
3 hours later.
Now I'm out of range, and on full HP. You're toast, buddy. Prepare to die. Bam! That's a lot of money. Using the knowledge that I gained in my first playthrough, I was able to have a much easier time making my way to the final missions. But even then, I could have still optimised my XP much better. However, I only had $15,398 to work with for the final battle in my first playthrough. Do you want to know how much I had in my second? $77,015. That's barely over 5 times as much money. And that's with using health items and other weapons much more liberally as well. And so, I stocked up with more than enough items, and I tried to defeat the remaining forces of the Dogfire army to liberate the Doven Kingdom. As said before, these archers and knights don't do a lot of damage to us. So, using the knight's limited attack range, I very easily dealt with these enemies and entered the next mission with full stats. Then I positioned myself so that I was in range of all of the riflemen and dealt with this bomberman, since I would be able to survive all of the rifleman's damage as a tank. After that turn, I could heal and barely survive the damage that I took from this bomberman and mortar. From there, I restored my stats and dealt with the last bomberman, taking me to the next mission. Once again, I ran headfirst into battle and grabbed the gold bar. After repositioning and healing up, I took out the trucks one by one, leaving just the tanks, which gave me time to heal up for the next mission. I did end up having a close call with this submarine, and I then put myself in a bad position by trying to use a bomb here, since the real position of these enemies is a bit misleading. But thankfully that didn't matter too much. After using the missiles once again to handle these enemies, I entered the final duel with Stardox once again. So, let's finally end this game. After pushing him into this corner, I was able to use bombs to deal massive damage, taking turns to heal when needed. Thankfully, he doesn't deal too much damage, so it didn't matter that I took 100 damage every time I used a bomb. When Stardox's health is below 1600, he turns into a knight, just like we can. With just another bomb and a revenge attack, he then had less than 1200 health, turning him into a rifleman. Then, once he was below 800 health, he turned into a tank. Now, after his health was below 400, his health was set to 1000 as he entered his final phase, the helicopter phase. This seems intimidating, but it was also not difficult at all. When he became a helicopter, his power, armour and strength only increased by 15 compared to when he was a tank, which is very little in the grand scheme of things. However, if we didn't have any bombs, it would have been awful trying to beat him. With our final bomb, we finally defeated Stardox and completed the game.
Thaler's family and the Doven general have been brought back to the Doven land. Bingus II, the last warrior, has been successful at the battle. He defeated and eliminated all of the Dogfire enemy. Stardox has died, and the Dogfire kingdom has fallen. King Thaler rebuilt the Doven Empire, castle, and army. Bingus II has been assigned as the army commander of the Doven Kingdom, and the Doven people live in peace. Congratulations, Bingus II.
Now we're shown our final stats: the number of enemies killed, the total number of turns taken, our total money at the end of the game, and our total score. Before beating the game, our total score was calculated as the last mission number beaten, multiplied by 1000, plus our current total money, plus 100 multiplied by the total kills minus the total turns. And so, plugging in our values, we obtained 116,568 points. After beating the game, our total score increases by a further 1 million, giving us the score on screen. Honestly, I think this is a good way of calculating the score, even if I think it should use the total money gathered over the entire game as opposed to the current money at the end of the game. Now, let's take a step back and have a look at the game using the 5 criteria I gave earlier. The core gameplay mechanics, the story, the balancing, the sound and art design, and the replayability. With Strategy Defense being a turn-based strategy game, it's great that the developer introduced mechanics, items, and enemies as the game progressed further and further, as it helps the player learn each mechanic properly. The 4th mission, being straight after the introduction of items, is perfectly structured to allow the player to see how each item works. With so many enemies in this mission, the player is forced to use an ammo item, and probably a health item, in order to win. Also, they can use the magic arrows on faraway enemies to deal damage without risk of revenge attacks. This logic also applies when change items are introduced. For each mission after a new rank is purchasable from the shop, the map is structured in a way that encourages the player to use them, allowing them to gain an understanding of each new rank. The 7th mission demonstrates the limitations of the knight's short attack range, but also the benefits of its high ability to move, showing the player that sometimes it's useful to switch between ranks, even if they're sacrificing something else. Also, by allowing the player to decide when to move and when to use their main action in their turn, makes every decision strategic in nature. Plus, being able to destroy certain terrain is a very cool touch. I just wish it was more relevant and better explained to the player in-game. However, the magic system is left to rot as the game progresses. Unlike the other items, there's no plus variant or new magics available in later missions. Plus, it was a bit clunky to use anyway. So, once the game reached the halfway point onwards, the game felt simpler to play, since we could just ignore that mechanic. This was also the case when we became a destroyer in Chapter 4, as we're essentially a more mobile tank without the ability to change ranks. These ideas are fine, but I think they could have been more fleshed out. Also, the fact that some of these stats don't really do anything just confuses the player. All in all, I do think that the game is pretty strong in this category, but the flaws are pretty hard to ignore. The story, as limited as it is fantastic. It does feel quite extreme that we are the last warrior from the Dovan Kingdom, and therefore a one-man army throughout the game, but the times where we speak to the courier and the Dovan spy help with making the Dovan Kingdom feel like it's still alive and trying to win. Plus, seeing Stardox's perspective and acknowledgement that he could lose in our final battle is an incredibly nice touch. The story does follow the final battle trope, where Stardox technically could have dealt with us much earlier in the game, even by showing up in any of the other final battle missions. But, oh well, it's cool. Also, Stardox using the ranks in a progressive system and restoring his health for the final helicopter phase shows how powerful he really is, making him a very satisfying final boss. At the end of the day, I think that all of this is more than good enough for a strategy flash game released in late 2007. The balancing also feels really good, which helps the development of mechanics throughout the game feel smooth and easy to learn, apart from the magic system as explained earlier. The items in the shop are also priced quite fairly, as well as the effect of the items themselves, once again excluding the magics. As the strength of the Dogfire Kingdom's forces grows throughout the game, these items help the player feel prepared, even if some missions are much more of a struggle than others. Despite my issue with the money system in my first playthrough, I think it makes a lot of sense to factor in the player's health when rewarding them for beating a mission. And by having the shops give a full refund when selling an item, the system is definitely in favour of the player. So I can't really fault anything there. However, I do think that the formula for earning money could have been more balanced, making it so the health remaining had less of an impact and the turn count having more of an impact. Or to add a bit more variety, there could have been more items which give money in a mission, such as a stack of gold bars which would give $1,000, or something like that. Regardless, the in-game help does a good job at explaining how the game works as well, but the player could progress through the game without any prior knowledge and potentially beat it. So I'm very happy with this aspect too. Although I haven't mentioned anything about the sound and art design so far, I think it's absolutely phenomenal. The music tracks are decently long, nice to listen to, and there's a good variety between tracks, all of which help improve the player's experience of the game. Plus, having realistic sound effects for the movement of each rank, the use of each weapon, and for the death sounds of each enemy type also make the game feel much more immersive and unique compared to other turn-based strategy games that I've played, flash game or not. The simple, cartoonish art style may not be everyone's cup of tea, but I personally think that it adds to the game's charm, which is one of the many reasons why this game has stayed in my brain after all these years. Also, I really like the art choice of having our character be a large figure on a small map. To me, it makes our character feel important and builds on the one-man army idea. And finally, we have the replayability. Now, as a turn-based strategy game with inconsequential RNG, you may think that this is going to be limited at best. And you'd be right. At the end of the day, the game is technically solvable, whereby using a planned out set of instructions would allow you to beat the game every single time you played. However, as you saw earlier, the level design itself means that the player can be locked out of progression by how they played the game beforehand, leading to me creating a separate playthrough in order to actually beat the game. Also, with a good bit of freedom in the game, the player could always limit themselves with the items that they use, such as choosing to never use tanks. I don't know whether that would be possible, but perhaps someone could try. As said before, I think the formula for money earned should have been adjusted, but I really do think that the general idea is exactly what the game needed. Plus, with a high score list to compare our playthroughs to, players at the time would replay the game to obtain a higher score. So, despite the game's fundamental limits, I think the developer handled this quite well. Now, I normally would be done with the review, since I covered those 5 criteria. But there's one criticism that I really want to highlight on its own. The lack of a 2x speed option for the enemy's turn makes the game incredibly slow and tedious at times. Take the 24th mission for example. There are 18 enemies, where they each have to move, attack, and take a revenge attack when I'm in range. Do you want to know how long it was until I had my second turn? A whole minute. In some missions, this isn't really a problem because there's not that many enemies. However, this issue meant the length of the game was much longer than it otherwise could have been. In the developer's defense, I think that this would have been much harder to implement than it sounds. But for a modern audience, this might put off a lot of people. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, and maybe want me to make a video on the sequel, then please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It'd mean a lot to me if you were to do so, but watching this far into the video is more than enough support. This video took me a long time to make, so I'm thinking of making a shorter video for next month, which I hope you guys understand. As said at the start of the video, I've uploaded my lightly edited playthroughs on my second channel. If you guys have any other suggestions for videos, then please do let me know. But anyway, thank you all again so much for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.